Imagine going out for a date hoping for a fresh start, a new beginning. Leslie Reeves, a passionate advocate against domestic violence, and Chris Smith, a man coming through his own struggles, met on a chilly night in Farmersville, Illinois, excited for what could be the start of something special. But what began as an ordinary date turned into a chilling nightmare that would leave the small town reeling and spark a nationwide conversation. Farmersville, Illinois, is a small, close-knit town, a community where people greet each other by name, neighbors are like family, and crime feels like something that happens elsewhere. It's surrounded by farmland, dotted with rustic homes and cozy diners, where doors are left unlocked and families feel secure. Leslie Reeves, a mother of two, a successful businesswoman and a fierce advocate for victims of domestic violence. She ran her own fitness studio, where she motivated others to find their strength. Her warmth and compassion made her a cherished figure, known for her unwavering dedication to helping people escape abusive situations. Leslie was a beacon of hope, someone who turned her compassion into action. For her, life was about making a difference. Chris Smith, her date for the evening, was a father and a gentle soul who had been through tough times himself. He had recently overcome personal struggles, and his friends described him as a kind-hearted man ready for a new beginning. Chris was known for his quiet strength, and those who knew him thought he deserved happiness after his difficult past. When he met Leslie, he saw an opportunity for something meaningful, a new chapter, and was excited for their date. On the night of November 24th, 2021, Leslie and Chris met at Chris's home. Their connection had blossomed quickly, and they'd planned a simple, low-key evening together. The two shared stories and laughter, talking about their lives, hopes, and plans for the future. For Leslie, it felt like a chance at happiness, a moment where life's pressures faded, leaving only the thrill of a new relationship. However, unknown to them, a shadow lurked. Leslie's ex-boyfriend, Bobby Tarr, had harbored a dangerous fixation on her. Friends of Leslie had noticed Bobby's increasingly erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to the date. His possessive nature had turned to obsession, and the idea of Leslie moving on with someone else drove him over the edge. That night, as Leslie and Chris enjoyed their quiet evening, Bobby's jealousy boiled over into a deadly rage. The following morning, neither Leslie nor Chris had checked in with friends or family. Calls to their phones went unanswered, and concern quickly grew into alarm. Both families, desperate for answers, contacted the local police. Soon, a search began, and it wasn't long before officers arrived at Chris's home, fearing the worst. Upon entering, officers found a horrifying scene that would haunt them forever. Leslie and Chris lay on the floor, both shot, and the extent of violence was immediately apparent. Tragically, Leslie had not survived. Chris, however, was miraculously still alive. Blood pooled on the floor, a chilling testament to the brutality of the assault, and the once cozy home had transformed into a scene of unimaginable violence. Every corner bore traces of the attack, evidence of a desperate struggle and a senseless act of jealousy that left nothing untouched. Chris was rushed to the hospital, where he was immediately taken into surgery, his life hanging by a thread.
This week's 48 Hours investigates a deadly first date. When first responders got to the scene in November 2021, they found fitness instructor Leslie Reeves dead and her date, Chris Smith, shot and seriously wounded. The Illinois couple had met online and decided to go on their first date the night before Thanksgiving. 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty reports.
It was around 3:30 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving Day 2021 when crime scene investigator Josh Easton of the Illinois State Police arrived at a house in the tiny village of Farmersville. What do you see when you first approach the door?
I noticed the side door of the house, the glass in the door has been broken out. The refrigerator was pulled away from the wall. The kitchen table was pushed, the chairs were knocked over.
Chris Smith, who lived in the house, had been shot, critically wounded, and was rushed to a hospital. His date, Leslie Reeves, who taught self-defense classes for women,
I'm Leslie from All You Studio,
was lying dead on the living room floor. How many times was she?
Medical staff worked tirelessly to stabilize him, but his injuries were severe. Chris slipped into a coma shortly after being admitted, and doctors warned his family that recovery would be uncertain. Over the coming days, friends and family held vigil by his side, praying for him to pull through. His survival became a symbol of hope for a community reeling from the shock of Leslie's death. Chris Smith lived with a dog named Tiki. An EMT told the family that Tiki may have helped Smith make it through the night by huddling with him for the roughly 12 hours that he was bleeding before being rescued. Meanwhile, detectives began piecing together the events of that horrific night. Witnesses and friends of Leslie spoke about Bobby Tarr's erratic and possessive behavior. Known for his jealousy and increasingly obsessive fixation on Leslie, Bobby had made his resentment toward her apparent. With a history of troubling behavior, Bobby had turned his attention to Leslie's new connection with Chris, and it seemed that his anger had reached a breaking point. As Chris lay in a coma, detectives worked tirelessly, collecting forensic evidence from the crime scene and questioning those who had interacted with Bobby in the days leading up to the attack. Fingerprints and witness testimonies quickly pointed to Bobby Tarr as the prime suspect, and a profile of his volatile personality and obsessive tendencies became clear. Bobby's jealousy, coupled with a violent disposition, painted a clear motive, and authorities moved to locate and arrest him before he could harm anyone else. Bobby Tarr was known around town for his volatile temper, particularly where Leslie was concerned. He had met Leslie years before and had grown attached in an unhealthy, possessive way. Friends and family members noted how Bobby would obsess over Leslie, refusing to let her move on. When she ended the relationship, he grew increasingly unstable, tracking her movements and showing up uninvited. The news of her date with Chris had likely pushed Bobby to his breaking point. According to some reports, Bobby had been seen around town on the night of the incident, acting erratically, almost as if preparing for something terrible. Investigators believed that his jealousy and inability to let go had spiraled into a desire for revenge. In January 2022, Chris woke from his coma and asked where he was and what had happened. He remembered nothing from the night of the shooting. He had no memory of his date with Reeves, even though he'd been talking on the phone and messaging with her 2 weeks before the shooting. Due to Smith's injuries, his neurosurgeon, Dr. Victor Williams, told Smith he likely would not be able to walk again. Williams and his team were dedicated to doing everything they could to aid Chris's recovery. Chris Smith's left leg is partially paralyzed from his hip to his knee. From his knee to his toes, he is completely paralyzed. After he left the hospital, he had to move back in with his mother. With Chris's survival, investigators were able to learn valuable details about the horrifying events of that night. Despite his injuries, Chris provided a crucial account of Bobby's sudden intrusion, the terror that followed, and his desperate attempts to shield Leslie from harm. His words helped detectives paint a clear picture of the crime and the man responsible. Within days, evidence linked Bobby directly to the crime scene. Forensic specialists found physical evidence connecting him to the attack, including fingerprints and DNA. Witnesses also recalled seeing Bobby near Chris's home on the night of the incident, solidifying the case against him. Armed with a mountain of evidence, authorities arrested Bobby Tarr, charging him with murder and attempted murder. The news of Leslie's death and Chris's survival spread through Farmersville like wildfire. Vigils were held in Leslie's memory, and her fitness studio became a makeshift memorial, with flowers, candles, and messages of love from those she had touched. Her work in domestic violence advocacy took on an even deeper meaning, as her friends and supporters vowed to continue her mission in her honor. The community rallied around Chris, whose survival was seen as a testament to resilience. Despite the trauma and loss, he became a symbol of strength, with townsfolk offering their support as he faced the long road to recovery. Chris's journey became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments there is a path forward. In April 2024, Bobby Tarr's trial started, which was a closely watched case, not just in Farmersville, but across Illinois. The evidence against him was overwhelming, with forensic proof, witness testimonies, and Chris's harrowing account painting a damning picture. Prosecutors argued that Bobby's obsession with Leslie had turned violent, and his inability to accept her independence had driven him to murder. The courtroom was packed with friends, family, and community members, all of whom hoped to see justice served for Leslie. As the evidence unfolded, Bobby showed little remorse, his face a mask of indifference which only deepened the community's grief and anger. Chris, though visibly shaken, bravely took the stand, recounting the terror of that night in heartbreaking detail. His testimony was a crucial piece of the puzzle, helping to ensure that Bobby would pay for his crime. The defense didn't put on any witnesses and counted on the jury to find reasonable doubt in the lack of physical evidence. After 3 hours, the jury found Bobby Tarr guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. 2 months later, Tarr was back in court for sentencing, and this time, so was Smith, to tell the judge how the shooting impacted him and his family. Cameras were not allowed in the courtroom. Tarr denied shooting Reeves and Smith. After hearing all the arguments and mounting evidences, the judge sentenced him to 85 years in prison. The sentence brought a measure of closure to those who loved Leslie, but her absence was still deeply felt. For Chris, the verdict provided a sense of justice, though the memories of that night would forever remain with him. The story of Leslie Reeves and Chris Smith serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of obsession and jealousy. Leslie's life, dedicated to helping others, was stolen by someone who saw her independence as a threat. Yet her legacy lives on, inspiring others to stand against violence and cherish those they love. For Chris, the journey of recovery continues. His survival is a testament to human resilience, and his strength has become a source of hope for those around him. While Chris mourns his old life, he is writing a book about his experiences.